Okay, so I've got my floor plan progressing a little bit, and now I'm going to take it into Photoshop to get a rendered version of the plan that I'm going to render in Photoshop to start with, and then I'll show you some options. So, sorry. So yes, I'll show you some options then for getting parts of the rendering and other bits from Revit afterwards. I'm going to start off with essentially a line drawing that I'll take from Revit into Photoshop. So I'm going to start off by duplicating the floor plan. And here, I think I'm going to choose duplicate with detailing. So all I've done is right click on my ground floor plan, and now I'm going to go to duplicate view, duplicate with detailing. And then I'm going to rename that view. And the pollen must have gotten into the air conditioning. So ground floor for Photoshop. I'm going to call that new copy of my floor plan. And then I'm going to tidy it up for Photoshop. So to do that, probably one of the most important things is that you crop the view. So make sure you know about cropping. If you're not using that already, you definitely need to look at that. And down the bottom, you've got the two buttons for cropping. But the one you probably use the most is the one on the right, next to the glasses. That's the show and hide crop region button. And you may need to zoom out to find your crop region. If you don't see it when you turn it on and off straight away, you need to zoom out far enough so that when you turn it on, you can see it. And then once you've found it, you can bring in all of the edges, generally to be as close to the plan as possible, or as necessary anyway. So you generally want to go fairly close to the plan, but of course don't crop anything that you do want to see. And that can save you hiding a lot of things. So by cropping, of course, we're hiding anything that's outside that crop region, but I then still need to go and hide anything that I don't need in Photoshop. Now that can include the reference planes, even though technically the reference planes won't come across anyway. I'm still going to hide them by hiding the category. And the shortcut for that, I want to also hide my sections. So I'm going to use the same option, but this time I'll use the shortcut, which is VH on the keyboard to hide the whole category. So VH is view hide. Then you can see I've got these elevation symbols as well. So I'll hide those again the same way by hiding the category. Make sure they're all hidden. And then the dimensions can actually be deleted, usually if you don't want them in that view. Remember, dimensions are unique to each view, so if you delete them from one view, they won't be deleted from other views.
Because they are in the copy, right?
Exactly, exactly. So if we go back to the original ground floor, the dimensions are still there. No, anything else will be. So model objects are common to views. They're common to all views. So if I delete this furniture, that's a 3D object. That's deleted from the entire project, so it's deleted from all views. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. No, that's good to take note of, because so it's only annotation that is unique in each view. So I also don't want to see the grid, so I'm going to hide that category as well. But then just to give you an example of something that can be hidden individually, I don't want these chairs to show in this view, but I don't want to delete them. So I'm going to select the, maybe the table and chairs actually, I want to hide in this view. So I'm just going to hold down Control to select those things. I'll come back to I'll show you that in a minute. So I just want to hide this table and chairs, but I don't want to hide all of them. So I'm going to right click and then hide in view elements. If I hide the category, it'll hide all my furniture. I just want to hide the elements to hide the ones that I had selected. And the shortcut for that, if you're wondering, is EH. So Yeah, so the up arrows. So to get all of your stairs to show up arrows, firstly, you need to have...
I put it out.
Oh, you can do that, but then you'd have to draw it back in.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. Yep. So I'm just going to draw very quickly a new stair because I want to show you something else. So I'm going to make this stair, let's say it's my access stair for the hotel guests to use to go up a story. So I'm just going to draw not too many rises, so we'll do, so how many is there? 24 in total, so we'll do 12, and then put in a landing, and then another 12, and hopefully that's something you can all do by now. And so I've got my new stair, and I wanted to show you that because if you're using the new stair tool, it's going to use the new up and down arrow. Right, so you'll see it's actually a separate object. I have to use tab here to highlight it, and then I can select it. And you can see over in properties, it comes up as a separate object, and it's set by default to automatic up-down direction. Okay, so to change that to always show an up arrow, doesn't matter in this view, but I'll show you. If I go to my level 1 floor plan, there's the same stair, and notice it's got a down arrow. We can't see it properly because I still need to put a void there, but I'm just showing you it does have a down arrow. So to avoid having to go and change that on every stair, you can just then select the stair path. You might have to tab to select it, and over in properties, then you can change that to this fixed up direction option. So it always shows up. Right, and then you can turn the up text off if you don't want that, if you just want the arrow.
But you won't, I will be able to get this one, the transparent one, show as well.
Transparent?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
This part.
Oh yeah, that will be transparent, which is how it should be.
In Photoshop as well?
Yes, yeah, it will be.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got my my new stair set up the way I want, but then I was going to show you, if you've got an old stair, you may not have one of these, but this is the old type of stair. And those stairs, you'll know they're different because they have the options for the up arrow or the stair path in the stairs properties. So here I've got the option if I want the up label, or if I want to turn the arrow on or off. You'll know if it's the old one because those options are in the stair. Whereas with the new stair, when you select the stair, you won't see those options. So you have to select the arrow. The arrow or the stair path is a separate thing that you can select, and then you get the option to turn the text off. So yeah, watch out for that. It can cause a few issues. And so going back to my floor plan that I've set up for Photoshop, just crop in a little bit more so it's a bit smaller. Okay, so then what sort of graphics do you think I'm going to use to go to Photoshop? What sort of graphics? So out of these options here that we've got, wireframe, hidden line, shaded, consistent. Yeah, exactly, hidden line. Yeah. So we're going to try and do as much rendering as possible in Photoshop, so I don't really want rendering or shading in this view at all. So you may have issues with, well, actually it looked like these shelves had a problem, but they're actually okay. It's just they've got a very fine mesh, so they're all right. So then it's just the walls that have shading. So you can turn that off, or you can, yeah. Yep. Yeah. You can bring parts in, yeah, or overlay different layers. Yeah, you can do that. So I'll show you that at the end. No, that's still within line to start with. Always, you always want the line version. Yeah. So before I do though, notice I've got these walls that are coming up grey. So I want them to be black. So remember, you can go into the wall properties, go to edit type, and as long as you're using the coarse option, for your, just down here in your view settings, right, then you can set this coarse fill colour, and I'm going to set that to black, and that way it changes the fill of the walls without changing the material on the outside.
What was it before? Can you come again?
Sure, so when you select the wall and go to edit type,
Type.
it's just this option here. So it's coarse
Course
fill colour,
yeah.
yep, and then you've got the pattern as well. Coarse fill colour, so you need to be in the wall properties. So you've got to select the wall first and then go to edit type. And then you'll get that coarse fill option that you can change if it isn't the right colour. Yep, so that's fine. Yep. It'll be 100% black unless you change it.
So it's better to change it here, but otherwise you can change it in Photoshop as well, right? You just,
You shouldn't need to touch that in Photoshop. It'll be black.
oh, okay.
If you set it to black, it's black.
Yep.
Black is black. It's yeah. Okay, so so that's now ready to go into Photoshop. Except, what's the final thing? You remember?
The page?
Exactly. That's good. Yep, that's right. The page. So I need to set up a page now. So I'll just do this again. So I'm going to right click on Sheet Saw, go to New Sheet, and then Load, and get a new sheet size. You might not need to if you've already got the title block you want. You can use that. So I'm going to try A3 for once. So A3 metric blank is the one I'm going to use because I don't want all of the title block information. I just want a blank page. Okay, so now back to my ground floor for Photoshop. I'm going to drag that from the project browser and then click to place it on my page. And then we can see, well, there's a problem. So this building, even at 1 to 100, is too big to fit onto this page. So I could make it smaller, I could make it 1 to 200, but that really wouldn't be great. For interior design, we probably want at least 1 to 100 for that floor plan. So instead of changing the plan to a different scale, I'm going to make the sheet bigger.
I'm sorry, we need to interrupt.
Yep, sure.
But do you mind to show us
Yep.
the door swing, how we change this in here from Revit?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that in a second. Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'll look at the door swing in a minute. Yep. So for now, though, I'm going to select the page. So on this sheet, I've selected the border of my page, and then to change the size, I'm going to go to Edit Type in Properties, and then I've already got an A2 sheet loaded. But if you don't, you can click Load, and then browse to find one. Yep. So here you go, A2 metric blank no border. It's a nice blank A2 page. And that will fit the floor plan at 1 to 100 pretty well. So now, just to make it even cleaner, I'm going to select the viewport and then over in Properties, change it to no title. That's the easiest way just to turn the title off. You don't need to manually do anything with that label. You can just turn it off, and there we are. So now the plot border won't print, but if you don't want to see it, you can always select the plan, go to Activate View, and then you've got the option down here to turn that or to hide the crop region. And then you can go back to the page if you want to, right click and you can go to Deactivate View or just double click outside the page or outside the viewport. Okay, so that's really important because you want the plan in the same place on the page every time when you bring it into Photoshop. But yeah, just because you've asked about the doors, I'm just going to go back to the plan and I'll put in a door just so you can see how it should work. So I'm going to go and just put in a door maybe to one of my walls. So here I've got the door tool, and you can see as I'm placing the doors, is this what you're getting when you're placing them?
Yeah.
Are they coming up like that?
Yeah.
They do come up like that.
Okay.
So that's how they should come up. It should have the door swing. There shouldn't be much to it.
Okay, straight away.
Yeah.
from the beginning.
Yeah. So if you've got a problem if they're not showing,
Then
it's,
you need to change the door type.
if that's right, it's either the door family, so just try a simple one like this, M single flush. It's either that, or there might be an issue with the view range. So in your view properties over here, so it's got floor plan there because I just pressed escape. So now I'll go down and click edit here next to view range, and then you can check the cut plane height. So your cut plane might be too high for the doors. So let's say I make it, I'll make it 2200.
It's not going to be seen.
That's right. And now the door, well, I can still see the door swing,
Okay.
but the door's hidden because it's cutting through higher than the door.
So what is that?
So it's view range
Is
in
it back to
view
the floor
properties.
plan?
Yes, yep,
Floor plan?
yep. So it's view range, and then that's where you can set the cut plane height. I think the default's a bit low, so 1200 is fairly low,
Yes.
and I think 1500 usually works better. And notice how it's now cutting through a bit higher on the stairs as well, which I think makes them look a bit neater. Okay, so otherwise though, that is set up ready to bring into Photoshop.
And also the shadow, please.
Oh, yeah, I'll do the shadows after. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start with this plan. Under the file menu then, making sure that I've got the sheet open. I'm going to go to File, Print, and then set Adobe PDF as the printer. Then you've got to go to Setup, down the bottom. Check the page size, so that should be the same as what you've set for the title block. Yep. So, yeah, that is, it is same as 1-to-1, yes, right. So A2, and then the orientation, whatever you've got, here landscape, and then probably the most important setting is that you choose zoom and leave it on 100%. And then OK. Now, when this happens, it's annoying. Yeah, it's frustrating because it's a bug. It shouldn't do this, but it does sometimes. Okay, so you can see here it's not giving me the option to choose current view, which is all I want. So I'm going to close it and see if I go back. Sometimes it'll come up. No. It's a bug in the program. It shouldn't do this. Yeah, yeah. That's right. And then you can tick the one you've got. That's right. Yeah, that works. Yeah. Pretty much, yeah, just go OK. Normally I'd click preview, but here you can't. So I'm going to click on... Oh, that's right, yeah. So you can just select one sheet. You shouldn't have to do this, but it's, again, just a bit of a bug in the program. So, and yeah, that's fine. I'll click OK, and then it's telling me you want to print one sheet as a separate file. Of course I do. So I'm going to say yes. And then give my file name. And fingers crossed it'll go through. While that's happening, the Adobe PDF sometimes causes problems or doesn't work, so make sure you've got some other alternatives. We can't install the alternatives on these computers, but you can definitely do them on your own. Yeah. So, yeah, Primo PDF's the easiest to get. It's free and does everything you need. Yeah. Okay, so now in Photoshop, I'm going to open that PDF file that I've just saved. Oops. Sorry, the other one, aren't we? This one. Okay, so there's my new PDF file, and there's a couple of options here. So, firstly, you want to look at crop to, and that should be on media box. The size you can leave, but then the mode You can leave it on sRGB if you want to, but RGB colour is fine. And probably easier to understand at first, so I'd start with RGB colour. Oh, that's if you want to see the measurements, but you definitely don't want to change it. Yeah, definitely don't change the size. Yeah, so that's just telling you what the size is in inches. It's not changing it. When you change it to millimetres, it's still the same size. It doesn't change it. And you definitely should not be touching the size. Right, because the whole point is we've made it the right size in Revit. That's one of the main reasons to use a CAD program, is because they make things the right size and you do the scale and everything there. So really important you don't adjust the width or the height, yeah. You can definitely change the units, so you can see the measurements in units you're more familiar with, like in millimetres or centimetres. Yeah, but it's fine to change the units. That's not changing the size. That's just changing the units that the measurements are given to you. Oh yeah, no, don't touch the numbers. Yeah, yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, if you change the size, then you're changing the scale. But yeah, it doesn't hurt to look at it in millimetres, because then you can see that 23.39 inches is 594 millimetres. So it is A2. Of course, of course. Yeah, we set it to A2 in Revit. A CAD program's always going to give you the perfect size. Yeah. So that's it. I've got everything that I want, and I'm going to click OK. And we'll get a cutout line drawing. And that's what you want. That's the first step. I see a lot of people who don't take the time to learn this, and they then render plans that have a white background, and it takes them twice as long because they've got to cut out in between all their lines. Good. Yeah, that's good. Good. So, yeah, because it's one of the most important things. And so, okay, so now I'm just going to put a fill over the whole plan to start off with, and then I'll add some more detail. So here you see I've got layer 1, and then I'm going to make a new layer, and I'll call that new layer white background, and then show you my new favourite shortcut. Well, I've known it for years, but I forget it sometimes when I'm not using Photoshop all the time. You can see over in the main toolbar, I just quickly switched from black to white. If you want black and white for your foreground and background colour, there's a button just for that. Next to the arrow that switches, there's a button that resets it to black and white. And then if you want to know the shortcut to switch the colours, it's X on the keyboard.
X?
Yep, letter X. Just switches between foreground and background.
Is that letter
X.
X?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Just switch the colour.
Yeah, really handy. White. And then the shortcut is Alt Backspace. How good's that? So Alt Backspace fills with the foreground colour. Oh, sometimes if you're doing it all the time, I mean, you'll be filling a lot. That's one of the most common things you do in Photoshop, is fill a selection. Yep. I just changed I made sure nothing was selected, so there was no selection. And then I made sure white was the foreground. Yep. I've got a new layer. Yeah, I haven't done that yet. So I've got my new layer over the top. Yeah, so you've made a new layer. Yeah, and then Alt Backspace. Alt Backspace. I'll have to have a quick look at it. I'll come over though, because that's... Okay, so that's it. So I've got my new layer filled with white, and then I'm going to drag it under layer 1, so the line work's back on top. And then I'll rename layer 1 and call it what it is, line work. Okay, so now I want to start filling in some of these areas with some different fills. So, again, a lot of people at first with Photoshop probably overuse the magic wand. It can definitely be really useful, but if I want to fill in maybe, well, even just a stairwell like this is a good one, but even before that, maybe I just want to put a fill over the whole floor, and then I'll pick out some areas to render inside that. So instead of having, now again, the people who don't use a transparency have to go and pick everything that they want to render. But if I just use a rectangular selection here and go over the whole of that floor, so I've just got a rectangular marquee and I've just dragged to go over the whole floor. So I'll make a new layer above and make sure it's above the white background but below the line work. And I'll call this floor texture for now. That'll do.
You do the thing first, then you create a new layer.
Yes, yep, that's right. Yep.
And then that gets in on the new layer. You don't
Yep.
cut the new layer first, then do the
No, the selection is independent of the layers. So you can do the selection before or after you make the new layers.
No, it doesn't matter.
No. No. And you can change layers after you've selected, that's fine. Okay, so I've got my selection, I've got my new layer, and now I just want to fill it with a plain colour. So are you all using swatches? I know you don't get into the habit when you're using these school computers because if you go from one computer to another, you might have the same swatches. But you know, you can save, you can save swatch files. Yeah, so if you can save your own swatch files, then you can take the colours. And that's really handy. But do you know what to do if you don't have that and you want to remember a colour? How do you record a colour?
Oh, the things are, I don't know, yeah, but I know one that animated crop.
Kind of, yeah. You just get the values. So here I've got, say, this what's one that I want to add? I don't really like any of those colours, but I'll go with this one.
Yeah.
So if you click on the colour over here, it gives you all the settings, and all you need to do is note down the RGB settings.
Yes.
So red, green and blue, if you note down those three numbers, then you can go to another computer and you can instantly recreate the same colour. Yeah. But it is good practice to store your colours in swatches, and when you might work on your own computer, that's something you definitely want to look at. So here, let's say I want to get a nice, really light brown.
But how did you save it here?
So you just click add to swatches. Yep. And then you should also get this option, but I know sometimes on the school computers this option gets disabled somehow. But normally you should have this option, especially on your own computers, add to my current library. And that can make your life much easier too. If you build up libraries that then you can use across different files. But most importantly, you can see now there it is in my swatch. So if you don't do that, you find yourself having to go back and backtrack yourself and find colours that you made previously. Okay, so I've got my colour. And then again, remember that shortcut, Alt Backspace. Having done that, it's frozen. Right. Yeah, I'll definitely do a texture, but at the moment the diagram's frozen, so there's something happening. I don't know what's going on. The network's got some weird problems today. Just trying to switch. Ah, it's this. Okay. Okay, we'll give it a second just to hope it comes back. There's every chance it will. Okay, so yeah, really important if you're using the college computers that you turn this option off, add to my current library, because it will most likely make your program crash, and it might even make everything that you're working on that computer crash. So watch out for that. Turn that option off and you should be okay. Yep, there we are. So that was just that little option. On your own computers, again, I'd highly recommend that you use that option though, because it's really important that you start to store the colours that you're using all the time, so you can reuse them. And then I can show you using the CC libraries, you can quite easily move those swatches from one program to another, but in Photoshop you can always go to save swatches manually and then save them as this format here, ACO, which you can use with other programs. I won't go too far into it. There is another format for swatches, but we can't use that because we haven't got the CC. We can't use the CC libraries, unfortunately. But yeah, so we can keep going with the colours though. So I'm going to just, again, do a selection and show you how useful it is to have a cut-out plan like this, because now I can just make a selection over the whole floor plate. I've got my foreground colour set. So again, Alt Backspace just fills it. You can go Edit, Fill, and then choose foreground colour. It does the same thing. It's Alt Backspace. Right, same thing.
So I've gone into the field.
Yep.
And I've made my pattern. And
Yep.
I've gone, it says preserve transparency. You click that on.
Oh, it's up to you, but you wouldn't have transparency, so don't worry about it. Yep.
But when I went okay,
Yeah.
oh, it came in this time.
Yeah. Yep. So you just need to have an area selected. So I'll go and make a pattern. So yeah, so that's obviously how you do a colour fill. Maybe I better show you gradients, because gradients I think it can be really useful as well with the gradient tool. It uses the foreground colour, so when you click and drag over a selection, it does a simple gradient using those colours. So it's with the gradient tool. And notice you've got different options. So that's the first option there, where it goes from your foreground colour to the background colour. And my background colour at the moment is black. So it's in the middle. It might be on Paint Bucket. So on the left in your main toolbar. So it's over here. So again, that's with the first option, which goes from foreground to background. So if I change the background to white, of course, then we get maybe not so gloomy gradient. It goes from the foreground colour to white, which can do some interesting things. And then you've got the other option, which is from the foreground colour to transparent. That's the second option there. So just up in your list of options. And then, oops. Well, here it's not doing much because I've already got that floor texture filled in. So we could always delete that, and then I can just show you then what the gradient does. Actually, it's...
But then you do it like when you use new layer, edit, fill, and then ground one. It is just on the floor, not with all of the furniture.
So, that's right. But it's going under all of the lines.
Yes.
Right, so
All
I'll just fill it with the colour again. So I just did Alt Backspace to fill it in.
Yep.
So then we go over the furniture and do the furniture on top of this layer.
Oh, okay.
So you build up the layers. Yeah, that's right. But if you had to do it the other way, if this wasn't cut out with a transparent background, even just to do this floor fill, we'd have to go and pick in between all of these areas. And so where you've got the stair, for example, here, where you've got these dashed lines, you have to go and pick in between each of those lines just to do your floor fill.
Yes.
So that's why it's really important to have the cut out layer. And you can put textures on. So let's say I want to try and do a wood texture. So I'll go and open up the file that I want, and I'll show you a couple of options for that, because there is no right or wrong way, but there are definitely some things that will save you time. So here I'll go to Material Images on the P drive, and I'm just going to open up the wood folder there and get one of the wood materials that I like the look of. So maybe I'll go for my boring old cedar because I like cedar. Which one do I want? I think this one. Okay, so that's the image of the flooring that I want. So I'm going to go to Edit and then Define Pattern. So then I can simply go back to the previous file and then go Edit, and I will use Fill this time and choose Pattern from the list. And then you'll see if it's on the same computer, you'll have the pattern if you've made it on that computer. Yeah, you've got to be on the same computer. Exactly. Yeah, you won't get it on any computer. And you can move them across using the CC libraries, but again, we can't easily access those. So, yeah, oh yeah, you just choose the area that you want to fill. So that's the whole area selected because I had it all selected, but I don't want to do that. I just want to do one part of it like you do. So now I'll make another layer. So I'm going to call this floor brown base, my original layer, and then I'll call my new layer. Yep, that's fine. Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I suppose, yep. And that's when you do your pattern. So you might want to take the other pattern off or move the pattern. Well, you've got that's where you put your texture, so it's on whatever layer you had when you made it. Yeah. No, probably not. Well, you could always rename that layer and then make another layer. It's up to you. It depends on what you're trying to do. Yeah. I'll fill it with something else. Yeah, so you might want to go back, just undo. Yeah. So I'm just going to put it, say I want to put it into this area here. So here I can again just use the rectangular marquee. Oops, sorry, I've gone onto a different tool, so let's go to rectangular marquee and then just do a new selection over that area. And then again, edit, fill, and choose the pattern I want. Now can you see there's a problem? Way too big. Right, so yeah, so you've got a couple of options. If it's something that you're going to do all the time, probably the best option is to go back to the file that you used to make the pattern and make that smaller. So you can go just to image size, here under image, you can go image size, and then you can essentially, let's say you want to make it half the size, you divide these numbers by 2, so that...
the other way?
Yeah, I'm going to show you another way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this way works. If it's something you're doing a lot, it's worth making the pattern the right size. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you the other way. So the other way is to, there's a couple of options. You can go, firstly, you can use a script. And this brick fill one will work. The problem is you've got to set all these options. So the pattern scale is the option that we want. But then you've got to make sure that the spacing and the offset and the colour randomness and the brightness and the rotation are all 0 to start. and then you can change the scale by eye even, and that works pretty well. So that's one option for scaling in here. You can also change the rotation, but there, notice it's rotating each image, so I'd have to rotate by 90 degrees and then, oops, and yeah, I have to make it exactly 90, and then I can adjust the spacing, and with a bit of work you can get it to be right. But that's quite difficult. So I'm going to show you another way in a second. But this way you do get some options. So you can change the scale that way. There's yet another way, and that's to double click on the layer, not the name, but the swatch next to the layer name. You've got that swatch, double click there, and that brings up the layer styles, which a lot of people call blends, because here it says blending options. So when you hear someone talk about blends in Photoshop, what they're talking about really is layer styles. And you see one of the layer styles is a pattern overlay. Okay, so with that, if you choose it, you've got the option to set a pattern, just like I did. And there, notice you can adjust the scale and you get instant feedback in the viewport, which is kind of nice. So there, as I adjust the scale, notice it's showing me the result. So that's a good option if it's working for you. Yep, pattern overlay. And that does work pretty well, that option. I use it quite a bit.
Then the blend option is normal.
Yeah.
What
If you just need to change the scale by eye, yeah, that's a good option. Yeah. 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 So that works. So that's one option as well. But again, those options, it gets a little bit technical when you're working a lot with patterns. And I don't want you to think that's the way everyone does it. There are a lot of people who get great results out of Photoshop who don't even know how to make a pattern or use patterns at all. So there is another way, which I'm going to show you. So make sure you know the different options. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to turn my blend off, turn my layer style off, and then make sure there are no effects there. I just want to clear them all, sorry. And it's annoying when they won't go away, but they are, I think they're all gone. Yep. Yep. Okay, so, right, so I'm back to normal, and I'm going to show you another way. So again, if you can get the patterns to work, that's good. But I'll show you the way a lot of people I know do it in Photoshop, and that is go to the original image, select what they want.
I think it's gonna be harder, isn't it?
No, it's more work, but in some way it makes more sense to a lot of people. Yeah, this is the way most people start, and probably the way you were showing before. Edit, copy. Yep. That's right, select it, and then copy it. So edit, copy, or Control C. What, you have to select it. Right, so it's a very manual way. So select first, and then you copy to clipboard. Yeah, of course, you have to have the texture open. Yeah. And so then back in the file that you want to bring it into, then it's, now this is where I've got to remember the shortcut. It's Alt, I think it's Alt G. No, it's not Alt G. Yeah. So sorry, I'll just have to look it up because it's a great shortcut. I just am a bit rusty. Do you remember the shortcut? for copying within a layer?
No, but I was about to ask you about a
Oh,
shortcut
right.
too, which is why I made that face.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, another shortcut for Photoshop or
Lumion.
Lumion?
Is
Oh,
there a save shortcut?
no, I don't think so. Yeah, I know, it's a bit annoying. Yeah. Yeah, so I'll look it up, but I don't think so, yeah, unfortunately. So does anyone remember the shortcut to copy within a layer in Photoshop?
Control.
I just press copy and click on the other one and go paste.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's to paste. That pastes a new layer. There's a way of pasting without making a new layer.
Oh.
No. It's a really good shortcut though, so I'm going to look it up. It just saves you a lot of time. It's been a while since I've done it this sort of way, but
Where do you make, say for instance, put a timber in, and the timber is the plastic bit. Where do you change it? Now, before you put it into your file?
so the
Do you change the timber plastic and it's timber?
yes, you do. Yeah, that's right.
You
Yep.
change it now before you put it in?
No. After you put it in.
Oh,
Yep. That's it. Okay, I've got it. All right, so sorry about that, but I've got it now. Okay, so unfortunately the internet didn't help me there, but it jogged my memory banks and I've remembered. So, okay, so firstly, scale it in the file. The whole point is we want to scale it ourselves in the file where we're working, not in the original file. Yeah. So now, firstly, so I pasted my layer with the timber texture. Sorry, not yet. No. Oh yeah, copy and paste. Yeah, of course. That's the first thing. Yep, that's right. Yep, that's right. Yep. Okay, so I'll give you a new layer with just that timber texture. Okay, now, good little trick there. I know there are different ways of selecting the things on that layer, but one of the best is to right-click on the layer swatch, not the layer name, because that gives you a lot of other options, but not what you want. So you right-click on the layer swatch over here, and the image of your layer. Yeah, in your layers list. Yeah. So you right-click on the layer image. No, that's the name. You right-clicked on the name. So not the name, but the image of your layer, the little thumbnail. Yeah. I can't see that far, but the thumbnail of your layer. No, right-click on it. No, not the eye. No, next to the eye, there's a thumbnail. Yeah, that's it. Right-click on that, and you'll see Select Pixels. So Select Pixels selects all the pixels on that layer. In other words, the thing that we've just brought in. So if you've deselected it, that just makes sure you're selecting everything on that layer. Okay, so then the shortcut to scale it is Control-T. Now Control-T would work without the selection, but you'll see in a minute we want the selection. And you'll see why in a second. So Control-T, that's the shortcut for transform. And then I can use Shift and just drag that to, yep, so that keeps it in proportion, and then I can just drag it to the size I want. Alright, so that's the first thing. And then tick or enter to finish the scaling. Right, so that's the standard thing you do with lots of things in Photoshop. You scale them using transform. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's all by eye. Yeah, it's all by eye. Yeah. So again, that may be still a little bit big. So I'm going to do another scale and just drag down a little bit more. Yeah. So it's very manual, but it's a lot more natural for most people. Yep. So now I'm going to Control-C. So Control-T was to transform it, and now Control-C copies the new selection, now that I've scaled it down. No. We don't want to deselect. Control C. Yeah, while it's selected, that's right. Okay, so now, Control and Alt. And yeah, that's right. And so Control Alt and drag. And if you want to keep it straight, you can Control Alt Shift. Right, so notice how I'm then just dragging that across to get additional copies.
Control C and then Control what?
Yep, Control Alt Shift.
Control
Yep.
C first and then Control Alt C.
Control C just does a copy. Yeah. Control Shift Alt and that copies. So Alt is the shortcut to copy, basically. I don't think it really even needs to be copied, but it doesn't hurt to have it copied to the clipboard. But essentially, Alt is the option key to copy.
Control Shift Alt.
Yeah. Yeah. Control. So Alt is the copy option. Control keeps it on the same layer, and then Shift keeps it in a straight line.
Yes.
So those three work pretty well together.
Control, copy.
Yep.
Now, I should be able to move that across.
Yep. You're not holding down the option keys. Control Shift Alt. You've got to hold them all while you do that.
Well, this is like more.
Yeah. So it's a lot more natural for a lot of people. This one. Yeah.
And now drag.
Yeah. And that way you can make them a bit different as well. They don't all need to be identical if you do it this way. Okay, so if you spend a bit of time with that, it'll work. And well, you haven't got anything. Have you got anything selected?
Yes, it's got a line going round.
Yeah. Okay. So hold down Control, Alt, yeah, and then drag it. Are you on the Move tool?
No.
Oh, you got to be on the Move tool. The first button. Yeah, you're still transforming. You've got to finish the transform. So tick or enter. Yeah. Yeah. And then drag it. There we go. That's it. Okay, so notice though I've gone outside the room. So the final thing I wanted to show you there before we maybe have a bit of a look at shadows, and that maybe is a good place to stop because it looks like you need a bit of time just doing these things, even though you probably can do a lot of them already. Photoshop's one of those programs. These things might seem complicated when you explain it, but it's actually fairly, well, not basic, but once you've done it a few times, it's a lot easier. So, I want to have the floorboards stop at the edge of the room. So the easy way is to simply select that area and then press delete on the keyboard.
I think you get in the wrong.
That's right, but I'm on the wrong layer, so I'll undo that and I'll go back to the right layer, and then I'll select that again, and then I can delete, and that deletes those things, of course, from that layer. But let's say I want to take it out where the columns are. Now, you can, of course, do the same thing. I can select that area and then delete. And that works. But can you think of any problems that we might have later if I do that? 'Cause what have you been told about the columns?
I can delete it.
You can take out most of them or a lot of the columns.
Most of the columns,
Yeah.
but
I'd be thinking, look, in reality,
a little
don't
bit.
just take out the majority. You need
Yes.
at least every second column, I'd say, overall, as a rough guess or
Okay.
rough guide. So, I mean, you can't have a building this big without some columns to support the floor. So, you can definitely take out a lot of them.
If I say we can change the columns
Yeah.
into the wall, otherwise
Yeah. That's right. So you can replace them with walls.
the walls.
And if you have walls like I've got here around this room, then you probably could take out these columns that are
In
inside,
the middle, yes.
because we can span across that distance with a beam. But so that's going to show you where the problem is, because if I've deleted the flooring, and then later I'm going to show you in a minute how to bring in an updated version of the Revit plan, what happens with the floor texture? I've got to go and make it again because I've deleted it. Does that make
You
sense?
can get erase something too.
Yeah, but it's still hard because I've deleted it. So what I want to show you instead is how to non-destructively edit things. Without deleting, you can use masks. So that's one of the last major things. So I'm going to go and undo by stepping backwards and go back to where I had even the texture going over the edge. And it's actually not a bad thing. You'll see a lot of people, professionals who use Photoshop all the time, they'll take their textures over the edge. They'll take it past the edge on purpose. There's a good reason to do that. So instead of deleting those things, I wanted to show you using a mask instead. So over here on my layers, I've got the layer with the floor texture on it selected. That's all. And then on the layer menu, this one you should do from the menu, even though, do any of you know another way of getting a mask? You might have seen it in layers down here. You've got this button here. That will add a layer mask as well. But at first, I'd recommend using the menu. It'll be easier for you at first if you go to choose layer mask and then start with reveal all. Yep. And so what that's going to do is add this extra swatch, extra thumbnail next to your layers. So that's my original layer and this is the mask. So the way a mask works is that anything that's black gets taken away. So I'm going to select all of this area and then I'll use Shift and then select the column as well. Notice my colours over here have changed to black and white. So whenever you're working with a layer mask, it changes your colours to black and white. So I'm going to switch those colours so that black is now the foreground and then Alt Backspace. Yep, Alt Backspace, and that fills the area that I've got selected with black. So what that means is, if I show you the layer mask, how do you do it again? There's a way of showing it. It's been a little while. I've forgotten the shortcut for that as well, but there is a shortcut to show the layer mask. There we are. So I just want to show you the layer mask. So there we are. So that's the layer mask. Okay, the shortcut to show it is Alt and then choose the layer mask if you want to see it.
But when you go to new layer mask
Yeah.
and refill all, hide all from transparency, which one is two?
Reveal all.
Refill all?
Yep. Okay, so I'm now just going to go and select inside these columns and do the same thing. Right, so, okay, so again, I'm using the shortcut to fill with black, but I can also go to Edit and then choose Fill and then just choose black, and that does the same thing. Okay, so again, maybe just to make it clear why that's so important, I'm going to save this file. And then just quickly go through the process that I can use to bring in changes from Revit now. So back to Revit. Right, so let's say we've decided we don't need these columns anymore. In the middle of that big room, we want to have a nice open space. So I'm going to go and just delete them. Right, and then okay, so now back to make a PDF again, exactly the same as I did before. And now current view is working, so I can show you the preview, that's all good. And then I'm going to give the file a new name. And then back into Photoshop. Right, so I'm going to go and open that file. I mean, you can place it directly. If you know about place embedded, you can use that if you like, but it doesn't hurt to just open it and have a look at it first. So if you want to, you can set the same RGB mode, everything else is the same. Okay, so here, select all, copy, back to here. I'm going to make sure I go to my highest layer. So I'm bringing in the changes from Revit. So I've just changed my plan a little bit. So I'll turn off the previous layer, that's got my line work on it. And now I'll paste in my new layer. And notice how it goes exactly into position because of the way I've made it from Revit. And then you can see that where I'd taken the columns out though, my flooring isn't there, of course, because I used the mask. But because I used a mask, I can simply go back to that mask now, select that area where I put the black in. Maybe I'll just quickly show you the layer mask first. So here, that's what my layer mask looks like. I've just filled those areas with black. So now I can just fill them with white. I could use the shortcut, Alt Backspace, but just so you can see on the menu, same thing if I go Edit Fill, right, and then choose white. And my floor texture comes back because I didn't delete it. So that's the key with non-destructive editing, using masking instead of deleting things.
Wait, come again. Before it was black.
Yeah, and so I filled it with white. So and you can paint with white, you can fill with white or black. So you can use the brush tool. I'll maybe give you another example in a minute.
So you just go back to the one that sit next to it.
Yep.
And then like go to the what's that? Image.
So
How to get it back?
you adjust the mask. So you select the layer mask,
Yes.
and then you just fill in the area that you want with black or white. So if you want to bring it back, you fill it with white.
Ah.
Yep, that's it. So,
So basically black is for like delete it.
yep,
And then the white is put it back.
yep, that's it. Okay, so I thought I'd just finish there with shadows, because once you can put in fills and patterns, then probably for plans, the only other really important thing you need is shadows and sometimes transparency and things like that. So here, I'll start with shadows. So I've got my new line work. Right, so that's my new layer that I've just imported. And so I better save my file in case something goes wrong. So, I think you've been shown this one before. When you double click on the thumbnail for your layer, to go back to layer styles, there's a drop shadow option. It's very ordinary. Sometimes it'll do the job, but usually won't. It's not quite right. But sometimes it's okay. So here, choosing that drop shadow, so I can see its properties. You can see then why it looks pretty average, because it's at 90 degrees. So I'm going to start by changing the angle. Right, so I'll try roughly 45. The distance is a bit too high as well, so I'm going to bring that back so it's a bit closer to my objects. And then the spread is essentially the softness, so you can see there, the lower, the better, usually. I don't want to go too high with that one. And then you've also got size, which is another one that's essentially to do with the density of the shadows, the way they're generated. But you can see the effect as you adjust it, as long as you've got preview turned on. Then you can get a good idea what those things do. And, you know, sometimes it works. Usually it's not really good enough, but for a quick shadow, it's okay. Oh yeah, with the lines generally, yes. Yeah, yeah, especially if they're filled in walls. Otherwise, oh my god, you wouldn't want to fill in the patterns.
But then what about if
The patterns are all on the floor, so you don't want them to cast shadows. Yeah, furniture, that's okay. Yeah, if it's rendered furniture, that's fine. But what about your walls? Normally you want your walls to cast shadows.
yeah.
Yeah, of course, they're the most important thing. If you want your walls to cast shadows, then of course, yeah, because they're the things that have the walls on them. Yeah. So that works a little bit, but then you can see there are issues with it. Firstly, it's rendering outside the building. We don't really want that. And we don't really have direct control over the shadows either. It's an automatic shadow. It's good when it works. So I might just, I'll just turn that off for now. But it's an option sometimes. And the other option, if you have gone to the effort of manually filling in all of your walls, it would be better to use the fill layer that you've used for your walls rather than the line work layer. Right, so let's say I've gone and filled in all the walls with black in Photoshop, then you could use that layer to cast shadows, and that's going to work really well.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Is that probably better?
Oh, it would be, yeah. But I'll show you another way. So that drop shadow, it's good when it works, but because it's automatic, sometimes it'll never do what you want. So you can put in your own shadows, and to do that, again, make sure you've got a layer. So I'm going to make another new layer, and I'll call this, I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to call this ambient shadows. Yeah. Okay, so then I'm going to select inside the area that I want the shadows to go. So I'm going to be a bit more careful here with my selection and just make sure it goes inside those main walls. Right, because I don't want my shadows to go outside of that selection. So that's a really handy trick actually. If you have trouble when using the brush tool, controlling where it goes, just make a selection. And then when you're using brush, it goes only where your selection is. So I've got a new layer, there's nothing on it yet, I've just made a selection, and now I'm going to go to the brush tool, change the colours to black and white, and good chance to show you a couple of shortcuts for the brush tool. And this works for lots of things, the same shortcuts. So I'm sure you all know when you right click, you can adjust the size and the hardness. That's something you've all done with the brush tool? You must have. Right, so, okay, so then you know the shortcut to make the brush bigger and smaller instead of having to right click and then drag the slider? There's a really good shortcut. So that's the square brackets on your keyboard. So the left and right square brackets, just above enter, you've got those square brackets. So that makes the brush bigger and smaller. Right, so that's a really useful shortcut. Another great one, if you hold down Alt and then right drag, when you go up, now again these computers are so slow today, it's going really slowly, but normally this is just instant. Okay, so when you right drag and then move the cursor up and down, notice it adjusts the hardness. When you right drag and move left and right, that changes the size.
So all
Yeah, just hold down Alt and then right drag. Yep, so left and right is bigger and smaller, up and down is harder and softer. Yep. Yeah, so up and down, that's hardness, and then left to right is size. Now, you can just right click and do it from there, but I know when you're doing a lot of this, you'll appreciate all those shortcuts. Okay, so now I'm simply going to paint in those corners. Now, spend more time on it than me, I'm just doing it quickly, but notice I'm not just trying to do it all in one go. The secret when using the brush tool is just to do short strokes. Don't try to do big long strokes. Right, because what's going to happen if I've gone around and done a beautiful job, right, and then done it all the way to there, and then, oh no, I've gone wrong and messed it up. When I undo, it undoes that whole brush stroke. Does that make sense? So instead of doing it like that, just do it in small strokes. It works much better. Alright, so there, I made a mistake, but no big deal. I can just go back that one step. Okay, so I'm just painting in around the edges. And this... No, this is ambient shadows. Ambient shadows are non-directional. Doesn't matter where the sun is. And you've got to remember, most of the shadows in an interior are not directional. Have a look around you. If you don't believe me, just look at some shadows in an interior space. They're very rarely directional. It's only if you've got a window that's shining light, like you can see here, through the windows. But even the chairs right in front of the sun there, you wouldn't know which direction the shadow is. So don't fall into that bad habit of thinking everything needs to have a directional shadow. It actually makes your perspectives look pretty ordinary. And plans look terrible when they're all directional shadows. It's good to have some, and the other thing is, even if you're going to have directional shadows, don't try and always base them on the sun direction, because it doesn't apply when you've got an interior that isn't lit by the sun, and that's most interiors really, then sunlight direction is irrelevant. But ambient shadows are really what gives depth. And ambient shadows are there always. Whenever you have two surfaces that meet, what they essentially do is they occlude or they block the light where those two surfaces get closer together. I'm just trying to keep my hands straight while I paint this. Might seem like a bit of work, but this is the way artists work. They manually draw in the shadows. They don't just rely on some automatic shadow. And with Photoshop, you shouldn't be trying to rely on automatic shadows. They look terrible, usually. Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But don't worry if you make a mistake, because then you can just switch to paint with white and then go back and paint in those areas. Or here you can, go back a bit, you can use the eraser. So remember, the eraser's got the same option. You can adjust the hardness of the eraser and the size, and go back and just fix any issues around the edges of your shadows like that. It does take a little bit of time, but if you take your time with it, it does a really good job, and much better than the drop shadows. My shadows are still a bit hard there, so my eraser's still a bit hard there. So just trying to get a soft edge all the way around. And you've got to spend a bit more time on it than I'm trying to do it pretty quickly. Okay, now remember, this is not the way the shadows are going to look. Right, we just paint them in black, and you'll see in a minute how that all goes together. Okay, so that's getting there. Okay, so you're probably thinking, well, there's this whole black edge now, but how do we make that look like a shadow? And the way you do it is, firstly, you can adjust the opacity. So in the layer properties there, you can just change the opacity. And then the other option is you either usually want multiply, or sometimes soft light is even better. But here it's a bit too much with the opacity, so I'm just going to use multiply. Okay, so you can see how that just adds a lot of depth. So I'm going to deselect now so we can see it. That's without the shadows, and that's with. And then again, maybe the opacity can come down a bit more. There we are. So you want a bit of unevenness, but not too much. Again, that's with, that's without. So I can then do the same thing around all the walls. So these walls here, we probably want them both sides, so maybe I can try doing both sides at once.
there any way to do the shadow from Revit?
Yeah, you can get directional shadows, not ambient shadows, but directional. You can. Yeah, I'll show you that next. Yeah, yeah. But Revit's not going to do it all for you. I'll show you in a minute. So, okay, so now if we've got these stairs, that's where we're going to have a problem because the stairs would have their own little shadows. Okay, so you can try and get part of it from Revit. So I'll show you that. Yeah. Okay, so here though, I mean, I'll definitely spend more time on it than that and just keep fine-tuning it. There's a real art to it, but when you see those really nice rendered plans that have shadows that look really good, that's the way they do it. They just paint them in themselves rather than using the automatic shadows. Takes a bit of time, but for interior design, decoration projects especially, that's a really important skill. Just go over and over. It's like learning how to paint. All the great painters know how to paint shadows, and they don't just do directional shadows. In fact, they probably spend more time on the ambient shadows than directional. And you'll start to notice that when you look in the real world, you see these shadows all the time. That's how you know corners are there, and you know objects are close to each other from those ambient shadows. Okay, so, but now I'll show you how to get the directional shadows. Okay, so we've got our line drawing back in Revit. So I'll just activate the view, turn my shadows on. Right, and there we are. We've got our automatic shadows in Revit. I don't really want them to go outside the building though. We just want an interior, so I'm going to go to my sun settings down here, clicking on the sun and then sun settings, and you see there's an option there for the ground plane. Well, this is to do directional shadows. I don't want to have to go and draw those. You can draw them in Photoshop, but this will just save you a bit of time. No, they were ambient shadows. Yeah, so they're non-directional shadows, which are actually your main shadows for most things. Yeah, you know, you do them together. You do them both. Both, yeah. That's the whole point. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's it. So here, I'm going to go firstly, still on lighting, I'm going to choose one of these presets. I'll choose the sun from top right, and then duplicate it. And yeah, that's here. So that's just in Revit. You'll have that already when you're on lighting. So you've got lighting, and then sun from top right, and then I'll choose duplicate, and I'll call it sun from top right, Photoshop. The name's up to you. This is just so I know what it is. And I'm going to turn the ground plane off. I'll click apply so you can see what that does. It just takes off this shadow that goes outside the building. I don't want that. Then I'm going to change the altitude. I'm going to make it 55. And then just click above so I can click the apply button, and then you can see what that does. Yeah? Yeah, yeah, yeah. To make it a bit shorter, the problem is it's also brought it around, so then you've got to come back and adjust this one. It's a bit tedious, but that's how you have to do it. So I'm going to make this, I'm going to try 115, and that's going the right way. Yeah, I might have to bring that altitude back. Well, it's altitude and azimuth, but they work together. You've got to use a bit of trial and error sometimes to get it to do what you want. Azimuth. Yeah. Okay, so azimuth is the compass directions. Yep. Yep. And then altitude is the height in the sky. So a higher angle there should be higher in the sky, but I'm not sure. I think they've got it back to front in Revit. I've always had to experiment with this one, but it's not. I know they're not technically correct the way they do it, but a bit of trial and error. That's why it's good just to get used to. Well, it depends on what you're trying to do, but here I want to make them shorter.
So shorter is in azimuth or in altitude?
Both. They both work together. Yeah. Yeah. It's getting there, yeah. So I'm going to keep pushing it though. And maybe I can bring this back down to 45, because 45 in the end should be right. No, gone the wrong way. It's not right, the settings, but here we go. So that might be a good little rule of thumb or example for you to use. 155 and 25 is what I've ended up with, but again, just experiment with those values in small increments. Yeah, I mean, there is a logic to it, and I think in terms of spherical geometry, they're probably right, but it's not the way I was taught azimuth and altitude anyway, so who knows. But again, a bit of trial and error. As long as you're not making huge changes, then you should be able to see which way to go. So I've got my shadows, and now I'm going to go and make another PDF by printing to it. So I'm not changing any of the settings here. Just doing what I did before. Click OK. But then notice this time we get this message. And what it's saying there is that it's going to create a raster drawing because it's shaded. And the reason it has to be shaded is because it's got shadows. Even though I don't have any colours or textures, it needs to make it a raster file because of the shadows. That's okay. That's I know that's what I'll need to work with, so I'll just hit close there. There's nothing I can choose here. It's just information. You just say you accept the message. It's just a message. It's not. Yeah. Okay. So here I'm going to give it a new name though, and put shadows in the name. So I know this is the one with the shadows. Save. Okay, so there we are. So we've got a special version of our plan with the shadows. So now to use that in Photoshop, I can again go and open that file. Now again, you can try placing it directly, but again, it doesn't hurt to open it and see what you're getting in Photoshop. So all I'm going to do is change the mode here back to regular RGB colour. Everything else I'm going to leave. Click OK. And then hopefully you can tell what the major difference between this and the previous line work plan that I brought in earlier. What's the major difference, apart from the shadows? So what's the difference between this and this is the one I brought in at the beginning?
This one already has the white background.
Exactly. It's got a white background. It's got the shadows, but it's also got a white background. So what if we were trying to render that? See, a lot of people, I see skipping all of these steps that I showed earlier, and they just go straight to this. And they get a plan that's got a white background, and they spend all day cutting out that white background just so they can put in a few textures. So that's why it's still good to start with the cutout line work, and then just use this for the shadows.
Yes.
So that's the trick. So I'm going to just go and select this, and then copy it, go to my Photoshop file, make sure I'm at the top, and then paste. So now I've got a new layer over the top of everything that's for the shadows, but at the moment it's covering everything up. So then the secret is just set it to multiply. So there we are. So that's the key to it. And then it might make it clear out why use multiply. Using multiply. So that layer, it's really a multiply layer. So the shadows layer, by changing it to multiply, well, on normal, that's what it looks like. But then by changing it to multiply...
But we copy paste like from that one.
Yeah, over the top, that's right.
Copy it
Yep,
and paste it into this protocol.
yeah. Right, and by setting it to multiply, essentially anywhere that it's white, it lets through the colours underneath.
But then what about if we already like color the, because something like that, then you can see like all the furniture is in white color, right?
Yeah.
So what about if we already have this in white color? Is it gonna be on top of that?
Yeah, if you've got a layer, if you've got a plan layer with white in it, make it a multiply layer.
Everything is like
And then anything that's white will bring through the layers underneath. So that's it. And so now I can change the opacity of this layer to tone down my shadows. So that layer basically is for the shadows. So you can see now I've got separate control over the shadows, and my line work still stays as it was, right? Because the line work, remember, is on its own layer. Right, so the lines are still going to come through properly. Without that, that's what happens to the line work. You see the difference? Right, if I didn't have the line work there already, then when I set this to multiply and bring down the opacity, it fades the whole layer, which is a problem. So that's without the line work, but then with the line work there, it's not a problem. And then
So is this applied to 3D as well?
to
Is this going to be applied to 3D as well?
similar ideas, yeah.
Similar
You can
ideas,
use all these ideas in 3D. And if you look at the way people in the 3D industry work, they take this idea much further. They have multiple channels. Sometimes I'll have files with 10 or 20 channels. So you have some for shadows, you have some for certain kinds of lighting, backgrounds, you can have a mask for those, and have that all render out as a different channel. So that's it. But even just having the ability then to adjust the opacity to change the strength of the shadows, because it's on its own layer, is a huge thing. So, that's full shadows, looks horrible, but by toning it down, we get a lot of depth. But still we can read the plan fairly clearly. And then there's nothing to stop you going back and rendering things like furniture, which is what you should be looking at. So, yeah, that's it. So, so just spend as much time as you want on it. I won't do. I'll try to hold off on the Lumion until after the holidays. But make sure you have had a go at Lumion, because it'll give you a lot of options for rendering that you won't get with just Revit on its own.
Do you think then that our exhibition project,
Yeah. Yeah.
should be done in Lumion and they should be done in
No, not necessarily. You might get some designs for some reason always look better in Revit. Certain kinds of geometry and certain materials definitely come up better in Revit.
And what about the top people last year?
It was a real mix.
You would know.
It's a mix.
It was a mix.
Yep. There's no right or wrong. And some people just take to rendering with Photoshop and like to do nearly all of their rendering that way. They don't really render in Revit either, or Lumion, and just render as much as they can over line work that comes out of Revit in Photoshop. And that's a really nice technique if you like more of a watercolour style or graphical style of rendering. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just Photoshop. Just Photoshop, without any of the 3D rendering at all. But it's important for this subject that you have some 3D rendering, because that's something you've got to assess. And then the reason I keep pushing Lumion though is not that the rendering's better, because for still renders, Revit is still going to be maybe slightly better. It's going to have a slight edge on Lumion for a little while. Lumion's really improving quickly though. But then at the moment, you've got to push it a bit. But have a look at some of the demos. I don't want to say Lumion's bad, because it's getting better all the time for still renders. I'll just quickly show you. Right, because until you see it, you don't realise what it can do. Until you've seen some examples done by people who know what they're doing. Yes, that's the problem. But you can do it very quickly, so you can get most of it done in Revit, and then bring across what you need to into Lumion, and just do that part in Lumion. So I think it was pretty amazing for basically real-time 3D, which in the past took literally weeks to render, and you get it done in less than a day. That's Lumion. Yeah.
So Lumion is just from Revit, or I can
No,
do
no.
it from SketchUp as well?
Yeah, you can do it from SketchUp. Yeah, from any program, any 3D program. So it was mainly created to make 3D animation much more automated, but it's now getting to the point where still renders are a pretty good thing from Lumion. But then the other thing I want to push you, this is Beautiful, that's the Eames house, which I love. Yeah. So, yeah, it's all possible with the version of Lumion that we've got now.
How do you get like the furry things there?
Yeah, that's not. There's a material. There are materials that just Google it. You'll see there are videos that show you how to do all of that. So the plants and things, though, that's all just from the plant library that come with it. Yes. Yeah, and that's the other big advantage with Lumion. You get lots of library parts that come with the program, unlike Revit, where you don't always get those things. Even though Revit's got its own pretty good library, you get extra stuff with Lumion. But then the other reason I'm pushing Lumion is for the stylised renders. Right, so if you don't want to do the fully photorealistic sort of rendering that you're seeing here, I'll just see, I'm sure they're going to have some stylised ones in this demo. So I know it's a bit to take in, I'm not forcing you to use any of these options, I'm just giving you different options. So, let's see, I'm pretty sure here they'll show some stylised renders. I think they're trying to push the, all the photoreal things that the new one can do, which is pretty good. But let's just see. I'm not going to search for Lumion. Right, so you can do this sort of thing, which in the past, when you saw this, you knew the person who'd done it was a real whiz with Photoshop. And you can definitely do that with Photoshop. Have you all had a look at the brushes that you can download for Photoshop? That's a really great thing. If you like watercolour or that sort of artistic effect that you get with different mediums, then have a look at the watercolour brush and other similar options that you can use with Photoshop. There are lots of people who can do this work just with Photoshop, with a line drawing as the starting point. But it's kind of nice that Lumion will just give that to you, and you don't necessarily have to be such an expert with Photoshop. So that could be another option if you want to try and get that sort of effect, and that's a nice thing. So that's another reason to maybe think about Lumion, and it's a fairly easy thing just to try and bring your model into Lumion if you have a look at the steps that I went through last week, and that might give you some options. Yeah, I'm not trying to force you to use any particular tool, but I just want to give you options for rendering and presentation, and that's definitely one of them. So you're saying that there were a couple of other things. Was there anything that I've forgotten with Photoshop that you wanted me to look at? Yeah, you've got to. Yeah, that's right. Try those things, and then once they a bit more practice. Yeah, sure. So anything else you can pick up with Photoshop you want me to look at? Or it's all kind of okay? Yeah, sure. Okay, good. That's all good.